cars, you'll see magnificent woodwork, and all that woodwork is done by our carpenters, including the boot at the end is all steam bent wood. All the woodwork inside is all mahogany. The seats are all ash. And we had one person whose only job was to go to the lumberyard and pick out the lumber and match it all.
What about the people who run this, the driver and the conductor? Was it hard or challenged to find the right sort of person?
Well, that's a contractor. That's Herzog Transit Services. They're a division of Herzog Company, and they do this around the country. They have another line up in California. This is kind of, I call it their toy department here, but they have commuter lines in Texas and California. We have two people on the car, and it could be more economical to run just a driver, which, like if you go to New Orleans, there's just a driver on the car. I wanted a conductor on there also to interact with the passengers, as you saw today. That's what they do, is to hand out the conductor caps and greet people on the car to make it more, not just a transit line, but make it a real tourist line.
We're talking to a gentleman here who has a sort of grime-covered uniform on that looks to me as if he is one of the workers for these classic cars. And I understand his name is Doug Ward. Tell us exactly, Doug, what you do.
I'm the mechanic for this. I do all the maintenance and keep the cars running.
Did you, as a little boy, have a train set?
Oh, yes.
What kind of train set you have?
Had a Lionel train set, so had that for a while, and then got into high school, ended up in the smaller scale, into the HO trains.
On working on a thing like this, what have you found from a technical point of view to be the biggest, mechanical challenge?
Most of it, everything is big.
It's big?
You need a forklift or a crane to work on a lot of it, and the things we have seem to have the most.
Friday, May 27th, I want to welcome you to the committee hearing. I'm joined by Mr. Huizar. We do have a quorum. What I'd like to do, Madam Clerk, why don't you read item 2? Let me dispense with item 2, and then we'll get into the DWP portion of.
Resolution Harris Dawson Huizar and Chief Legislative Analyst report relative to including in the city's 2015-16 state legislative program support for Los Angeles County's efforts to amend state law to grant counties authority to seek voter approval of a tax on a personal income above $1 million per year in order to combat homelessness.
Thank you. I have one speaker card, Mr. Previn. Come forward. Well, now you'll be able to come forward. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. I'll take the full 2 minutes on this one. Thank you.
Mr. Previn.
This is the great...
Stop. You have 1 minute, Mr. Previn. I run this meeting, not you. Okay? So now, go
Correct,
ahead.
sir, and thank you, Mr. Westall. This is the great item from last week when, you may not know, sir, but a number of the delegation from your team, I believe it was, actually, do you have anybody other than you here, sir? Is there a non-quorum?
You're wasting your time.
Oh, I don't see any other council members other than you, but no worries. This is a good idea. This is $1 million. People who make over $1 million. Oh, is that Huizar? Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I haven't seen you in a while. In any case, this is a good area. This is income over $1 million. We take 0.5%. So let's say you make 1.5 million, sir. The idea would be a $2,500 tax on that millionaire for that particular year, plus or minus. In fact, it would be a little less because they have deductions. But this is a great thing, and I just hope that when the party bus was rolling around with Mark Ridley Thomas in Sacramento last week, or this week, that we were not advertising that we'd pre-voted on this. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any questions on that, Mr. Huizar? Okay, so then without objection, that'll be the order. It would be deemed approved. So that now brings us to item number 1.
Item number 1 is a joint city administrative officer and chief legislative analyst reports. This is relative to governance reform of the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power as initiated by Motion, Fuentes, West, and O'Farrell.
Okay, I want to do a couple of things. First of all, I want to ask Deputy Mayor Romero to come up here and join me. And I also want to acknowledge that we do have with us today, as we have had at every hearing, council member Fuentes. So he will be here today to observe, answer questions, or maybe ask questions if needed. But we appreciate you being at each and every one of these hearings. But I want to start out with a report from the department. So if you guys could come forward, Sharon, we're going to start off with your presentation. Go right ahead.
Good morning, Sharon So, CLA. Patty Huber, CAO. So we have a short PowerPoint presentation. We have a number of reports that are already on file with regard to DWP reform. We did release 4 reports within the last few days. These are in response to a number of direct questions that you provided to us during the last few meetings. The first slide relates to board support. There is a report on file, and this answers the specific question of options for implementation of support staff for the board. Our report outlines a number of options that are available to you, some that would be able to be done administratively, and some that would be able to be done by charter amendment. The 3 options that are outlined in that report relate to the general manager being able to identify existing staff to support the board. The second option would be for the board to create a separate board support group, but ultimately the appointing authority would still be the general manager. Both of these could be done budgetarily within the department. The third option would actually require a charter amendment, and that would involve designating an executive director and authorizing the executive director who supports the board to appoint the positions that would support the board. So that third option is the one that would require a charter amendment.
Let me stop you for a minute. I have to apologize. Mr. Wilkinson, would you come forward and take your position as well? Go right ahead.
The second slide relates to board structure. You asked
and Dr. Pickle. Go ahead.
Sorry. You requested us to look at compensation options.
Go ahead.
For a part-time board, as well as salary issues. So we did review a number of other entities. If it was a desire to compensate the board members at a higher rate, that could be done via increasing the attendance fee via the administrative code, or you could also establish a separate attendance fee entirely for DWP. That could be done administratively. In terms of reimbursement for expenses, that also can be done administratively. That could be done by the board, and council action would not be required to do that. The third option would be to actually create a salary for the board members. A salary would be a little different in that the charter does state that this board is a part-time board, and to establish a full-time salary, there may be some difficulties. We would have to explore that. But certainly increasing the attendance fee to accommodate a higher compensation rate could be done via administrative code.
Let me jump in if I can, and let's spend just a moment, because I do want to get to our environmental panel. One of the things that I would like for us to talk about is some form of a stipend, or whatever you want to call it, that would help us attract the best of the best. And $50, I don't think, is it. So I just kind of want to lay that on you. We maybe need to look at some comparisons, and not so much as a salary, but I just have a feeling that we want to make this, we want commissioners that are going to really sacrifice the time. Not that they don't already do that, because they do. We have great commissioners, but we want people that would feel as though that they could take the time necessary to provide the kind of advice and guidance that this council would need.
Certainly, a stipend actually would be a good option to go, especially if you're going to a part-time commission. We do anticipate that the commission is going to be more active with the requirements for the new rate ordinances that have been adopted. So a stipend established on a monthly basis makes plenty of sense. That way, it wouldn't be dependent upon the number of, I mean, if you have too many meetings, then all of a sudden, if you do it an amount by meeting, then the amounts could vary. A monthly stipend is fixed. You know what you're getting, you know what you're paying, and then you have that monthly amount that can be paid to that commissioner, and it wouldn't be dependent upon the number of meetings called, because you don't want to influence number of meetings based on being paid per meeting. So a stipend actually makes good sense. And
You know what we should do? We should look at, not that, and I'm just asking the question, not suggesting, not supporting, not promoting, but why don't we find out what the county does? I believe it's with their personnel. I'm not sure. Personnel or, well, just check their commissions. I don't know if it's planning maybe, and then AQMD.
Certainly, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you. Continue. I'm sorry.
Okay. The next area that you asked some questions in was relating to contracts, and you asked us to look for options for streamlining that process. For a couple of them, charter amendments would be required. You could eliminate the ordinance that is required for design-build contracts. This is a place where the department has indicated that that creates, a lengthier, more uncertain process for them. And as you lengthen the time to go out to contracting, you can impact the cost that you have to pay for that contract. The other thing that you could also do would be to eliminate the ordinance requirement for power contracts. This is another area where, again, because the charter requires it to be done by ordinance, it creates uncertainty and a longer, lengthier process. Most of the other utility organizations do not have this, and so DWP is always having to manage the process when they're working cooperatively with other organizations that, because they belong to a number of joint power type authorities, and they're usually struggling to be timely with their documents there. Things that you can do through the administrative code, you could adjust the RFP competitive negotiation requirement for the purchase of specialized equipment. You could also increase the general manager's contracting authority by specific categories and thresholds, which would facilitate the purchase of sort of standards, products, and services, and the report outlines that in much more detail. And then, of course, you can increase the board's authority to contract without council approval from 3 years to 5 years, which would create efficiencies in the contracting process for the department. The last report was relating to hiring and exemptions. Here you asked us for options to modify the personnel functions for within DWP and increasing exempt positions for DWP. In order for DWP to assume all personnel responsibilities, you would need to change the charter, because that is currently with the personnel department for all city departments, including proprietaries. There are options to improve hiring that can be done administratively, and we have some preliminary information from the personnel department that talked about, different options for creating units within personnel or beefing up staffing. We think that should be done with some more due diligence to establish sort of the performance metrics and requirements, so that DWP would understand what it was getting if it was paying for more resources, and there was some accountability between the two departments, and we would recommend that our two offices help to facilitate those conversations. Regarding exemptions...
Well, you know what?
Yes.
I'm going to jump in. I would like for you to engage in those kinds of conversations so that we have more, I don't want to just say options, but give us a better idea of how something like that would work?
Yeah, we have started that, and those are ongoing.
Okay,
So
well, I would
we'll
hope
do
that
some more.
we're going to try to do another hearing next week, and maybe you can give me, have a report back on that.
We'll try. It's a
Thank you.
long process.
I know it is, but maybe you could at least give me an update as to where you
Absolutely.
are and what other steps need to be taken before you could give us some kind of a formal recommendation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The next area is on exemptions. Currently, the mayor and council can approve exempt positions for DWP within our current citywide limit. That's always a slightly moving number based on what things are being approved over time. But as of, sort of today, there's currently about 33 unfilled exempt positions that exist out of the 200 that council has established. That would require going through the process of having the mayor recommend it to council and council approving the exemption on a position-by-position basis. Alternatively, council may by ordinance increase the maximum number of citywide exempt positions to no more than 1% of the city workforce, and you kind of did that already when we went from the 150 to the 200. This would be expanding on that previous action, and that could give the potential of approximately 183 additional exempt positions. The next thing you could do is that you could do a couple of charter amendments, and then that way you could increase the number of exemptions specifically authorized for DWP while maintaining the other exemptions for other citywide purposes. And alternatively, you could also do a charter amendment that would permit increased exemptions for DWP through the collective bargaining process, similar to what we had put in our original report. There's some additional language that would have to be facilitated with the city attorney.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, Sharon?
Just one more thing. We do have one more report that's pending. This relates to the Office of Public Accountability, and we expect that report to be released in time for your committee meeting of next week.
Thank you. Anybody have a question before we move on to presentations from our environmental friends? Anybody want to say anything? Mr. Wilkinson?
Well, I do notice that there's no report on option for the department in conjunction with its labor partners to create its own modified civil service system. One of the things is if you exempt the department from the city system and have language in the charter which said the department may create its own, then you have more flexibility on things like exemptions, job descriptions which may differ from the city's existing job description but meet their local requirements. So the proposals that in your report you're talking about are not as flexible as that option.
That option was in our original report. These reports were in response to committee direction to look at a couple of things in more detail. Our original report had the issue of creating the own civil service, and that still is something that the committee could consider.
Thank you. Just one check.
Okay. Mr. Pickle, you wanted to say something? Dr. Pickle?
I think we've included in these report backs the most important components. That is, what are we doing to improve contracting and hiring?
Okay. Thank you. And I guess I should just take a moment to explain what this committee has attempted to do throughout this process is to partner with the mayor's office, which we're doing. We have Deputy Mayor Romero with us. Dr. Pickle has been very engaged, and we appreciate your engagement. And also, either it's been Mr. Wilkinson or another representative from the neighborhood council that have been here, and we have treated them as if they were members of this committee without voting rights at this point, but we haven't voted on anything yet. So I just wanted to explain, if you're here and saying, God, who are these folk? That's who they are. So I want to thank you, ask you to hang around, and then if we could get Evan, Jonathan, Jessica, all you folks come on up, Lisa, and let's sit at, if we could, sergeants, let them get in. Come on up to the table. Hey, Drew, is there any particular order, or do we? Okay. Good morning.
Good morning.
Why don't we start off by just identifying ourselves?
Great. My name's Evan Gillespie. I work for the Sierra Club.
My name is Lisa Hart. I'm with the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance, speaking on my own behalf today.
But thank you for coming.
My name is Jessica Goodhart. I'm with the Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy.
I've seen you a couple of times at these. So what I wanted to do was to, you know, we've had reports from our city staff. We've had engagement and presentations from the neighborhood councils. We've had business presentations, and we've had a lot of, at least public comment from labor. So what I wanted to do today was to kind of take a temperature with the environmental community, get a feel for some of your recommendations and suggestions. So why don't we start out with, Jessica, why don't we start out with you, and
Sure.
Let's just talk for a bit, and there may be some questions, there may not, you know, hard and fast rules to this, so go right ahead.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, council members. As I said, my name is Jessica Goodhart, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the LA Alliance for a New Economy. We're a nonprofit that advocates for good jobs, thriving communities, and a healthy environment. And as part of the Repower LA Coalition, we've been advocating for some years for environmental equity and good jobs at the LA Department of Water and Power. And we've been proud to join with the mayor and council leaders to advocate for higher energy efficiency goals and for programs that help low-income customers and create good jobs. And we're now actively campaigning for the adoption of a community solar program that would address the great inequities in the current solar portfolio. And finally, also, we're working with DWP to develop a set of equity indicators to be included as part of its performance indicators. That these will help the public advocate for equitable services throughout the city and more effective outreach to hard-to-reach customers. I'm here today in support of this conversation and really want to applaud the council leadership and mayor's office for moving this discussion forward. I want you to consider these priorities as you craft the ballot measure. The first is vision, policy vision. The DWP needs to be guided by a policy vision that ensures safe, affordable, and reliable water and power, but not just for this generation, also for the next. And that's where the environmental piece is really important. And the department needs to also be able to do its day-to-day work of managing its workforce, entering into contracts and so forth without undue delays. And the DWP needs qualified, unionized workforce that draws from the region and that has the capacity to carry out a long-term vision. And finally, whether we're talking about providing clean water or solar power, the department needs to serve the entire city equitably, renters and homeowners, small businesses and large, residents from Watts to Westwood to Pico Union. And you've heard from many speakers that the current governance structure is not working to accomplish these goals. We agree. The contract approval process is overly cumbersome, the hiring process too slow and insufficiently flexible, and the rate-making process is unpredictable. With this structure, I believe it will be hard for DWP to meet its clean energy goals. Indeed, it's already been hard, and the local water goals as well that are so critical for the city. make no mistake, DWP is and should continue to be a source of good middle-class jobs for Los Angeles. That's one of its important contributions to the city. And when it comes to workforce, this is a really important moment because the workforce is aging. Many skilled craftspeople are being lost. These are the folks who are going to be maintaining and building new infrastructure. Fortunately, there's an excellent job training program in place to ensure those jobs go to residents in LA who need them most. And I have today a report I want to share with you that was released this week on the utility pre-craft training program. These are some of the folks who are doing the energy upgrades to make low-income homes and also businesses more energy and water efficient. Many of these trainees come from high-poverty communities. They've faced barriers, and yet they're seeing tremendous success on the job. The DWP has invested in these workers, but because exams are given so infrequently, they must often wait years to be placed or settle for positions that they are not explicitly being trained for. And other trainees have struggled with a personnel department that disqualifies them from permanent positions in spite of strong performance in the program and the city leadership's stated commitment to fair hiring for people with backgrounds. We support, for these reasons and others, giving DWP authority for hiring. With this authority, there can be real accountability between management and employees, between the utility and its customers, and more jobs created for LA residents. We're talking today about challenges, but there are also so many benefits to having a public utility that controls generation as well as distribution, reliability, relatively low rates, the tremendous strides under your leadership towards clean energy and towards a more robust local water infrastructure, and also a strong culture around training and worker safety. I hope city leaders that will find a way that we can find a way to build on these strengths and address the very real challenges under discussion today.
Thank you. Lisa, you want to go?
Sure, thank you. I absolutely support the idea of the environment and equity being included somewhere perhaps most appropriately in the mission for the DWP. Certainly, I've been fortunate to be part of a working group that the mayor put together, and one of the things I've learned is that a lot of multifamily residences sort of fall through the cracks in the current system. Another issue that I've heard you folks talk about that I think is really critical is that the City Council's retention of authority over policy matters of citywide significance to ensure, among other reasons, that we're doing the best we can for the environment. I've heard some discussion about that. I'm not sure where we're going to land, but it seems that that's absolutely imperative. Mm-hmm. Another thing that I'm personally super curious about is the idea of integrating sanitation, public works, and DWP better to address our drought. I don't know a lot about this, but I have learned that this requires charter changes, and I don't think I doubt that that's something we can get into for the November ballot, but I think this is a great opportunity for us to learn more about what that would look like. And of course, this is urgent, so I think we should be moving on that as quickly as possible. And lastly, I think it would be important to have some mechanism to ensure that we're tracking our progress towards our environmental goals. I don't know if that should be in the charter or administratively, but we should be knowing how we're progressing in terms of reduction of greenhouse gases, and I think that's absolutely critical as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now I want to have Evan and Jonathan arm wrestle, and whoever wins gets to go first.
I'll defer to the former commissioner.
Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, Council President Wesson and Mr. Huizar and Mr. Fuentes. I'm delighted to be able to provide testimony.
And thank you.
Thank you. Personally, and I'm not representing an organization other than the 5 years that I served as a commissioner at DWP, and I have to say, I loved being there. It was wonderful to be able to work with the men and women of that department. That's been was one of my great surprises and joy, is the professionalism and the hard work that I saw evidenced in that department, counter to what you might read in the Los Angeles Times. When it comes to environmental work, it's actually not those of us on the outside, but the personnel of DWP, the linemen, the people who are heading up the power system that are really doing the day-to-day work of the environmental community. They're the hands of making this happen. So there are three areas that I would like to address. First of all, when it comes to personnel and workforce, as I said, there are some really great people there. However, and I would recommend what Mr. Fuentes has put forward of having the personnel services be centered at the utility. I think that makes perfect sense, with one caveat. The utility does not perform annual reviews or even biannual reviews. There are people who have been working at that utility for many years where their performance is not evaluated. And I have to say, there's a small few who game the system through various rules, especially exploiting civil service protections. And I know this is somewhat of a third rail, but I think it's really important to give the department the latitude to be able to take action related to job performance. Personally, I'm very happy that the utility has a strong living wage. I think that that is the perfect position that this utility should embrace. Why should this utility train up people to work in this industry only to have them plucked away by investor-owned utilities after we've trained them? We need to pay our people well. But by the same time, I think we should expect excellence out of all of our personnel. The second area I would like to speak to is the question of authority in setting policy. I think that the mayor and the council members should retain their policy-making authority for the most important matters. So, for example, this body recently passed unanimously a goal of reaching 45% decrease in greenhouse gas emissions below 1990 by the year 2025. That is a very aggressive goal, very aggressive. Would a board at DWP similarly have set such a goal? I think it is up to this body to set the broader policy goals and for the commission to ensure that that vision is played out. However, devil's always in the details. So let's take stormwater capture, for example. There's a lot of talk about increasing local stormwater capture. There are a lot of different strategies you can pursue to get more stormwater into the system. Do you provide incentives for people to have cisterns on their own property? Well, that's a very interesting proposal. But over 50% of Angelenos live in multifamily units. Is that something that they can do themselves? Is the majority of Angelenos able to take advantage of that program? Are we retrofitting dams? Are we replumbing our streets to capture more stormwater? So would it be the city council's decision on a strategy on how we get to more local stormwater capture, or would that be the decision of the board? And I think the environmental community, frankly, would like to have a say in how those policies are ultimately executed. And would they have a say if the commission was totally separated from the policy making of city council? So it's something to really ponder. And I don't have a good answer for you, but I know that the city council and mayor's office should retain policy setting goals to some extent. And I say this as a former commissioner, which would reduce the power of the commission in setting some policy, but I think you need to retain that. And last but not least, it's the composition of the board itself. There's a saying that sometimes you have to disturb the bees in order to take care of the hive. And I think that's the role of a
I use that saying like every other day.
They do?
I
I apologize.
Mr. Fuentes and I just yesterday at the council.
My sincere apologies for repeating a cliche then. And so I think that is the role of the commission, is to look out for the greater good of the department when sometimes groupthink at the department has set the department on a course that may not be best. And you need a set of eyes that are there to ensure that the department goes in a good direction. I can think of a number of examples related to Owens Valley, a number of examples related to our renewable goals, where the commission stepped in and set a new policy that put the department in a much better position going forward. So those are the three main areas of my comments. We have a great workforce, but they do need to be reviewed, and if there are people gaming the system, they need to be moved on. We need to retain broader policy at the mayor's office and the city council, and that the composition of the board cannot be just those who are in 100% of alignment with the board, with the administration at DWP. They do good work, but you need a set of independent eyes who are willing to be critical and set the department on a new course. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I want you guys to think about after Evan will probably, I know I want to ask a couple of questions as to what are your opinions of some of some of the changes that have already been recommended or just part of the discussion. So I'm going to ask you, I want to just get your sense. So with that said, Evan, thank you all, but Evan, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, sir. So again, my name is Evan Gillespie. I direct the Sierra Club's Clean Energy and Utility Engagement in California. So I have a team that works with the Public Utilities Commission, investor-owned utilities like Edison, Department of Water and Power, other publicly owned utilities. So we, on a pretty regular basis, are working in the context of how to make utilities work more effectively for a clean and equitable environment. I did just want to start and thank you and thank the committee for what's been a really open process, and I appreciate the deliberate attempt to really bring in a number of stakeholders to hear their perspective. It's really important and it's meaningful. I also want to echo a couple comments that folks made earlier. We would agree that it's really important that you all retain your ability to set a vision for the utility and for the city. We like working with you. We want to continue to work with you all. And we think that the progress that the city has made over the last 5 or 10 years has really been because of the council president, the mayor, and the council more broadly. So broadly speaking, Sierra Club supports the efforts underway to modernize the utility. We think this is the right conversation to have right now. The public has very high expectations for the utility. We're asking a lot at this moment. And I don't think, honestly, we're really equipping the utility with the tools they need to be successful. We work on a regular basis with a lot of people over that department. I'd echo what Jonathan said. They're great folks, from the security guard to the person who runs the power systems program. And so I think a lot of the criticism that the utility faces and the workers face there is frankly unfair. And so we see this as really an opportunity to restore trust both in the utility as an institution, but the people there who are doing really good work. So we expect the utility to be successful. We expect them to excel at customer service. We want them to maintain a really strong reliability track record. We want them to deliver services equitably. We want them to operate in a way that's environmentally sustainable. But the issues that have been raised by Navigant, whether it's outdated contracting requirements, hiring challenges, a politicized rate-making environment, and the complicated governance structure, they are holding the utility back. So I'll give you a couple examples. These are issues that I think are partly about good governance, but they're also ones that really affect the environmental community and our ability to advocate and support the utility's efforts. For example, when you think about energy efficiency, the biggest culprit to missing our energy savings goals and ensuring that every customer in LA can participate in an energy efficiency program isn't the fact that the programs are flawed, isn't the fact that there isn't intentional equity built into them. It's the fact that we don't have the staff to implement them, to process the rebates, to do a multifamily building program. There just aren't the staff, and so hiring quickly is important. We've worked with Lane and the union to build a UPCT training program to support that effort. And folks do wait a really long time, and then sometimes they get to the end of the process, and because of a past record, they're formally incarcerated. Sometimes they can't actually get a job with the utility, and that's really unfair. And so the fact that we're able to reform the utility to ensure that they can have more flexibility about who they hire and make more intentional decisions would be really helpful. I think a couple other things I just wanted to point out here. One, restoring trust in the utility isn't just about showing that the utility can work more effectively and it's a higher functioning utility, but that when we think about reform, that we're really speaking to core values that a lot of the city holds around equity in the environment. So when we think about what we're going to be talking to our members about and what we're going to be talking to the public more broadly about in the coming months, we want them to be able to see how the environment and equity play into a reformed and more effective utility. I wanted to comment on a couple specific issues that have come up with in this discussion. So I'll make 4 quick points here. One, when it comes to rate making, we think that there should be rate making should be informed by a multi-year strategic plan. Right now, the way we do policy setting and then the way we pay for it at the department is a little bit backwards. So to give you one specific example, when we talked about the city getting off of coal, there was a very implicit conversation about how much is this going to cost? Are we going to save money in the long run, spend money in the short run? And so when the city actually passed the ordinance approving getting off of coal, we had a conversation about cost. But then we also had a conversation of cost, and we have it every single year at the time when we do set the city or the utilities budget. And then we have it again during the rate-making process. And so it leads to, I think, an inefficient process, but it also is one that's not as well-rounded and as informed as it could be. So the idea of setting a multi-year strategic plan led by the mayor and the department that the council has an opportunity to weigh on, that both sets the policy trajectory for the utility, but also looks at a multi-year budget that can look at the sort of the near-term costs, the long-term savings. A lot of environmental programs save customers money in the mid to long run. But, you know, for a clean energy contract, you're paying for the whole solar project up front, and then the savings come on the back end. So you're not really able to capture a lot of the cost savings in a one-year budgeting process. We also think that that strategic plan should really address equity to make sure that services like solar, energy efficiency, water conservation programs, that the programs that are designed address low income, that they have programs for senior citizens, that they're addressing both multi-tenant buildings, renters, as well as homeowners, and so that there's a really express intent in the strategic plan to make it both environmentally sustainable and also equitable. Secondly, contracting. We agree with the concept that it should be reformed, the idea that there's a 3-year requirement, the 3 years and $150,000 contract before it goes to council is inefficient. And I don't think, frankly, it's a great use of the council's time or the public's time to debate those contracts. In the power contract section of the charter, section 674B, there's a provision that allows the utility to move forward with renewing a contract for hydro without any council approval. Now, the Public Utilities Commission expands utilities authorization to procure clean energy resources first, more broadly. And so just as the charter says you can go off and purchase the Hoover Dam and renew that contract, we think that the city or the utility should be given more leeway to pursue clean energy contracts that don't need the review of the city council and don't need authorization by council. Lastly, and again, I'll just hit on this point, hiring should support innovative programs like the utility pre-craft training program. And so the issue that Jessica addressed, we think, is a really significant one, and the ability of the utility to be more flexible in its hiring practice to ensure that when we talk about clean energy and clean energy jobs, that every single person in the city can participate in an energy efficiency job, and that they're really good jobs. And so the fact that there have been barriers, I think, to getting folks into jobs through the current system is a problem, and it should be reformed. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay. Jessica, if you could just fix one thing. What is the top 2 priorities that you think we need to address to make the department more efficient?
I think the hiring needs to be fixed. That would be a top priority, and the contracting process as well.
Okay. So I'd like to go around the horn on that. So Lisa, what are you?
The exact same too.
Evan?
I'd say the rate-making process and the need for a strategic plan, and then the hiring.
John?
I never want the city council to go through what it went through with the energy cost adjustment factor, Mr. Huizar. I think you remember that fight. And so when it comes to rate making, I believe that the commission should have much greater authority to shield city council and the mayor from some of the antagonism that's out there. But at the same time, this is a business, and it needs to be given the leeway to do its work.
So I hear hiring, contracting, rate making. Okay, let's take some comment from the public at this time. We'll start off with a minute each, and if we have more time, I'll afford you the opportunity to come back and speak again. I just don't know what our time is going to be like. So if I could call Dr. Tom Williams and Teresa Sanchez and Blanca de la Cruz, please come forward. Yes, sir.
Good morning. Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council, Sierra Club Water Committee, and a few others. However, talking specifically, I've had experience about 40 years in water supply. The real problem is you don't deal with it as a real functioning corporation. That is, 7,200 miles of water pipe requires that you replace once every 100 years, 72 miles? Wow. Maybe 7 miles? That's only a few 100,000 feet every year. And you got to have the people for doing that. You got to have the money for doing that. And it was only about 5 years ago that we even had an organization chart for DWP after 5 years of asking for it. So you got to get this thing fixed. City Council, hey, the mayor's in charge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Teresa?
Good morning, council members and panelists and everyone. Teresa Sanchez, AFSCME District Council 36 and the Coalition of LA City Unions. We don't believe that anything that's wrong with the hiring process at DWP can be fixed by taking it out of the civil service system. There's a number of problems we have with that, but I just wanted to make sure everybody is aware that the coalition's recent agreement with the city and the mayor's recently issued executive directive regarding service restoration and equitable hiring has banned the box for people with criminal backgrounds. We've removed that as an issue, as a barrier to employment with the city. We're working with all city departments and the personnel department to make civil service more efficient through our targeted local hire program that we're just beginning to implement. So we would be happy to work with the department and the union and the personnel department to talk about how we can replicate that at the DWP to create an equitable hiring program.
Thank you. So if I could get Ms. Dela Cruz, if I can get Brenna Norton and Mr. Previn.
Good morning. I'm Blanca de la Cruz, representing nonprofit owners of affordable housing and the low-income renters that they serve in Los Angeles. We support the reform efforts to enable DWP to operate more efficiently. I have also provided written comments. We believe that it is essential for the charter reform process to include clear goals to further equity and access to clean energy resources. The city of Los Angeles has over 39,000 apartment buildings that house low-income residents. Unfortunately, this market segment is extremely underserved by DWP. For this reason, we ask you to commit to institutionalize changes that would provide equitable access to DWP services to lower-income customers by the end of 2016. My organization and our partners propose doing this in 2 steps. First, thank you.
Okay, yep. Good to see you again.
Good to see you. Being environmentally friendly by using my computer and not printing it out today, I guess. Good morning. Brenna Norton with Food and Water Watch. A couple specifics on rates. I also like the idea of tying future rates to thoughtful strategic planning. However, our members are strongly opposed to City Council only voting on a plan every, let's say, 3 to 5 years, but not voting on the rates. So I think City Council still needs to approve whatever that rate structure is going to be in combination with that strategic plan. Again, it removes too much accountability of our public utility if City Council is not approving rates by any means. Transparency along with that, I like the idea of putting on the website. I know that Mayor Garcetti has how he's reaching the sustainability goals and showing that progress. You know, with DWP, it would be good if the department had its own website showing where we are in meeting the sustainability goals, the One Water goals, the urban water management goals. A lot of times we're not meeting those goals, and we should see why. A lot more, but I'll try to come back.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Mr. Previn, followed by Ms. Fuqua. Good to see you again. Yes.
Thank you, sir. I think that's a great idea to post where we are in achieving those goals at DWP. I think that would go a long way toward comforting the ratepayers. One thought about the composition of the commission, sir. I think it has to be completely independent. And I know that neither the department nor the city council would particularly like that because everybody wants to control that group. But I think that as close to independent as we can get. You'd also asked about what is AQMD doing in terms of the fee. They're doing $100 a meeting, and they do about a dozen a year. It's interesting because the Board of Supervisors, I once took a look. There are a bunch of groups. I can give you just the rundown. LAFCO, they do 150 a meeting. SCAG does 120 a meeting. The Sanitation District does 125 a meeting. MTA does 150 a meeting. LA Care does 100 a meeting, and as I said, South Coast AQMD does about 100 a meeting. So we have to do 100 a meeting, sir. This is outrageous. And I will simply say this, that's for the Board of Supervisors. They collect approximately, on top of their 175, which is a little less than you guys get, they collect an extra up to 40,000. So
thank you.
Good for them. Thank you, sir.
Ms. Fuqua.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm here as a retired Department of Water and Power employee. And I would like to speak on the civil service portion, and I think that this system should stay in civil service with the City of Los Angeles because there's been widespread discrimination in the hiring practices at DWP for historically, I shouldn't say now, but historically, and civil service kind of got that straightened out. So the practice of staying in civil service with the City of Los Angeles is very, very important to the employees, the people who want to work for DWP and who will apply. As the lady said, the criminal background checks and various other things that happen that give us the right to have good employees. And as far as exempt employees are concerned, they have a provision for that in the civil service section.
Okay, so members, do any of you have any questions for our presenters today? Deputy Mayor Romero.
Thank you, Councilmember. I just have a couple questions. You guys alluded, thank you for your input. You alluded to some of the barriers to equitable access to the programs, including solar and energy efficient. Can you elaborate what specific things you think, what mechanisms we need to include to ensure that we have, some equity in these programs? And it's open to all of you. So you all alluded to it.
Hi. Yeah, so just starting with solar, the solar incentive program, we did an analysis of who is receiving the solar subsidies over a 15-year period, looking at the department's data on a per capita basis. And so you had, in a community like Bel Air, Pacific Palisades, it was about $200 per capita, and in Watts and in Boyle Heights, it was about 33 cents per capita. So there's this, gigantic disparity, and some of it just has to do with program design, right? It's for homeowners, it's for people who are able to put down capital or enter into lease agreements. So the Department of Water and Power right now is working on 2 pilots, community solar programs, where they would build solar on their own properties and allow customers to access the benefits of that solar, or they would place it on rooftops. So we think this is a program that needs to be moved along and supported. And would certainly appreciate your support. That's on solar.
So what's holding it back from moving along? What are some of the things that we need to improve to increase the efficiency of this program?
Right now, what's holding it back? I mean, I can sort of tell you there's sort of bureaucratic reasons. They're waiting for customer billing, But at the end of the day, I think, leadership is important on all of this stuff to moving it along.
I could say a couple things. One, first, we just don't measure for equity. It's not a performance indicator that the board and that the utility as a whole is measured by and it manages for. And so, for example, on the energy efficiency program, there's a long time when one of the biggest energy efficiency programs was pool pump rebates. It's a great way to save money. It's really, really cheap, but you have to have a pool to be able to participate in the program. And so it took a number of years of really forcing a question of how are we going to make sure that energy efficiency programs really do serve everybody. And, to get into a low-income apartment or a home, it's more expensive, and particularly if you're providing additional rebates, and it's absolutely the right thing to do. But if the utility's only goal is low cost, you're going to leave a lot of people out of programs like this. And so really embedding equity into the core mission of the organization and thinking about how do we measure equity. So, you know, example, that might be dollars of infrastructure spent by neighborhood. So we're getting a sense of how the utility is investing across the entire city, for example, or how many low-income rebate customers are participating in energy efficiency programs. There are a number of different metrics that you could set up, but the first thing is to really make sure that the department is managing for it and that there are metrics to see how are we doing. And then I think from there you can develop an analysis of, okay, how do you improve the program and make it more equitable?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. When it comes to solar and rebates related to electric vehicles, that infrastructure that gets put into typically a single family residence is usually in well-heeled communities. And in addition to the incentives for those programs, there are corresponding upgrades that have to be made to the local transformers and to the substations that also accrue to the benefit of these well-heeled communities, where the majority of the ratepayers who are apartment dwellers or condo dwellers simply cannot receive the same rebates. So it's currently a very tilted playing field. And there are literally hundreds of thousands of LA City residents that have old or decrepit refrigerators, and there's no way for this department, they want to do it, they can't do it, get into those apartments and provide free of charge a new refrigerator, which would reduce the energy load and provide real benefit to low-income communities, because those apartment dwellers don't own those refrigerators. It's owned by the landlord, and the landlord doesn't give permission for that swap to take place. There's huge environmental benefits that can accrue to low-income communities, but because of this split incentive, we're unable to do that. And I appreciate the mayor's efforts and the department's efforts to overcome some of those inherent biases in our rebate and incentive programs, but it needs even more attention.
Great. Thank you. I have one more question.
Go ahead.
What kind of water and power decisions, as you guys discuss, do you need to continue? Does the council and mayor need to continue making rather than the board? You touched on it a little, Jonathan, but can you guys specify some more specifics on what those are, what those should be? Because I think there's a couple of discussions that have talked about this. So from your perspectives, what do you think?
So from my perspective,
Jump
I think, one, ensuring that the City Council and the Mayor can continue to project a vision for policy for the utility is really critical. I think that, similar to what Jonathan said, if there is buy-in and support and opportunities for input from the Council and the Mayor on policy trajectory and then the budget through something like this, a strategic plan, rates then really, I think, flow from that budget. How much money do we need to raise? And it's really a discussion about who are we raising it from, how much of that money is coming from small businesses, large industry, renters, low income, it's really a sort of a rate setting process at that point. And so I think the council should retain the ability to deny a rate increase if there's something deeply unjust about it or if there's a real conflict. But I think the place to really weigh in is in that policy and budget setting moment, and then rates should be, frankly, more automated. I think that the problem is we set a policy, we set a budget, and then we don't fund it. And so I think the funding part of it should be automated if we've agreed on the budget and the policy. So that would be one place I think that's really important to weigh in.
An example that comes to my mind is the Stormwater Capture Master Plan. There are many elements within that master plan for capturing stormwater. I believe it could be the role of City Council and the Mayor's office to set sort of targets for what would be large-scale stormwater capture through, let's say, prioritizing the cleaning up of Hanson Dam, or trying to capture more water in the East Valley, where it really does make sense that we make those investments. And also set targets for providing incentives to a variety of different ways in which we can recycle water or use local water. However, when it comes to the contracts, when it comes to the actual awarding of the work that's being done, that, in my view, should not be the domain of City Council. That should be the domain of a commission, and it should be able to operate efficiently.
You good?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Weezar?
Thank you. And just following up on the issues raised by Commissioner Romero on the City Council and Mayor setting broad policy goals. And I'm of that opinion, but then again, I think of some instances where, for example, the Commission itself comes up with some great ideas. The Council and the Mayor are not in it every day, are not there seeing what's coming, what's going. Would you see some instances where, how would it work if, for example, the Commission comes up with some great policy ideas and goals? I mean, it's not either or, right? I just want to make that clear, that a lot of, when we say that the Mayor and the Council are going to set the broad policy visions and goals, it doesn't preclude the Commission from also heading in that direction. But what we're saying is that the Council and the Mayor should not be as involved in the everyday activities. And would most of you on the panel agree with that?
Yes. And for example, when you were chair of the committee, a lot of energy efficiency programs moved forward through the committee, but those ideas originated with the Department of Water and Power, and your committee had the opportunity to shape them, to weigh in on them, and to provide strategic input. But they started with the department, and so I think you're totally right that these ideas can come from the council or come from the commission. It can be two-way. And in both instances, I think the outcome was better for your engagement.
Yeah, and that's the issue in a raise, which means that we don't want to preclude the fact that a lot of these great ideas and policy goals, directions come from the Commission, et cetera. Not just say we could expect the Mayor and the Council to do that solely and no one else, and inhibit all these great ideas from getting some action and some decisions. Yeah, when I was the chair of the committee, I just felt like when we first was appointed there that we clogged a backlog of a number of great ideas that just that were sitting there in the Commission, and they wanted some council action on it, and we just were able to move on them. But I just want to throw that out there so that we don't just leave it on the council and the mayor themselves to do this and that, and whatever direction we go in here, that we definitely want to leave a lot of the room that I think would obviously happen in the course of the work, but I just want to point that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weezar. I want to afford the opportunity again to the folk that are with us today. Does anyone want to speak again where it relates to your views? I knew you would. Can we put some cards? I need you to come speak, but then fill out a card. So come on. Anyone else? Just line up behind Ms. Norton, I believe it is. And
appreciate you taking some more time here.
yes, go right ahead.
A couple things. I agree that we need to look at reforming, being able to better increase the hiring ability, maybe a slight increase in partner contracts and partnerships. What I'm worried about here is I think council still needs to approve contracts to some degree. Right now that threshold does seem a little too low. However, when we completely remove council oversight over contracts, there's no one's job in council to watch those contracts in the committee as it is right now, Energy and Environment. So veto power in my mind is not enough for this because no one's job in committee will be to watch those contracts if we take that entirely away. Also, I think we need to look at, basic purchasing and procurement at DWP. However, we can't do any of these things without taking away worker legal rights. Civil service was created for a very important reason. The fact is that the City of LA is in the process of reforming the civil service. So I think we need to have more discussions with the mayor's office and the restoration of the 5,000 civilian jobs over the next 3 years in that program that's in place. Last thing I ask, I know a lot of the folks here work on the energy side. There's a whole committee, Green LA Water Committee, of 25 groups working more full-time on the water side of things. So I hope you'll hear a little bit more from experts on the water side as well.
Thank you. So again, like I said, let's just fill out a card because I want to have a record of you speaking and how many times. Ms. Dela Cruz, right?
Yes, I want to speak that it's important to make equity intentional and it's important to provide hiring flexibility in order for DWP to be able to expand the staff that are focused specifically on the multifamily market sector. We have been advised that the department doesn't have staff specifically focused on designing programs dedicated for the sector, and they're not able to provide a single point of contact to multifamily nonprofit owners of affordable housing so that they can guide them through the various programs. For example, DWP has residential programs and they have commercial programs. There is no specific programs for large apartment buildings. There's also, this market segment also doesn't have access to account executives so that the department itself learns about this market segment. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Sanchez?
I just wanted to add that we strongly would advocate for more staff and other resources for the personnel department. I happened to be at the Civil Service Commission yesterday, and the general manager was speaking to the results of the budget process and the fact that personnel was given more resources to do improvements in hiring and recruiting for public safety. I think Department of Water and Power should also be a priority, and I think it's important for council to look at that.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm Kent Minot. I volunteer with the Sierra Club. I encourage the committee to consider the relationship between the different unions that work in the DWP as you formulate your proposal for governance. Listening to different people in the different unions, a lot of people say it's very important to have cooperation between them. This proposal involves hiring and increasing hiring. All the unions should benefit from this, but there is not a smooth feeling among all the unions at the present time. Also consider the time element in this decision-making process. Is it really necessary to get this on the ballot in November? This is a big governance proposal here. It's complex. We, the people, are the owners of the utility, and in order to get enough people to weigh in on it, it might be important to have a little bit longer process. I know that means it would take it to 2017 and not have it on the presidential ballot, and I know that's an issue, but it should be thought about.
Thank you. Just a quick response. I think we've taken this to the people, and we want to get as much input as we can, but it is still our goal to try to have a package that the council can at least have a conversation about. And I know I will be one supporting that we take some action. But I appreciate and am very sensitive to the comments that you made. Mr. Previn?
Sure. I'm representing here Studio City Neighborhood Council, and we request that the City Council follow the recommendations of the Neighborhood Council DWP Oversight Committee and the Industrial, Economic, and Administrative Survey for a committee to examine governance reforms for the Department of Water and Power with the explicit task of reporting its findings and recommending a measure for the 2017 ballot. The Governance Committee should be involved in drafting any memorandums and other information from the beginning and include at least 2 members from neighborhood councils who are familiar with the finances and operations of the DWP. The DWP Oversight Committee recommends that there be a robust and transparent discussion and debate before any measure is placed on the ballot for voter approval or rejection. If you have any questions, feel free to contact the Studio City Neighborhood Council. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Fuqua, you want to close it out, public comment-wise? Or you finish, or you want to give us the benefit of your experience one last time? I'm appreciative of you coming down.
Thank you so much. As far as the rates are concerned, thank you. As far as the rates are concerned, I think that the service charge that's charged for the sanitation should be somehow lowered, because the taxpayers, ratepayers, and stakeholders are really getting pushed on that. Their bills are often for sanitation higher than the water bill itself. And that would be my other comment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, we are getting close to the start of council. So what I'd like to, first of all, I want to thank my colleague, Mr. Weezar, and I want to thank Tony representing the neighborhood councils and Deputy Mayor Romero and Dr. Pickle and all of the city staff that engaged in this conversation, all of the representatives that adjusted their calendars to come spend time with us, Jessica, Lisa, Evan, and Jonathan. I really appreciate that. Ms. So, you're at the table. I have a feeling you have something to say.
I just wanted to make one clarifying comment. There was some discussion about the City Council setting policy for the DWP. As it stands right now, the Council doesn't set policy. The only thing that we do via 245 is express to the Board what the City Council's position might be on certain areas of policy. But as it stands right now, the Council does not control policy for the DWP. So I just want to make that clarifying statement.
Thank you. All of the people that came out, thank you for coming. Madam Clerk, is there any more business before this committee? This committee's adjourned. Thank you all so very much.